Welcome to this live stream from Windows on the World. Tonight we're going to be linking the past to the present, and if we don't understand what happened in the past, we can't respond correctly in the present. That's what this is all about. We're going to be talking about the fourth world. Many people may never have heard of that, but it came from the Fourth World Wilderness Congress in 1987. But that was really just a name that was put out to the public. The real fourth world is where the first, second, and third worlds no longer exist. There is a borderless Pangaea, a Pangaea of the mind, a kind of uniting around a common cause for a common purpose to create and control the accepted narrative of everything. That's summing it up. But I've got a very important video I want to play you tonight, which didn't even get much response the time it was put out. And it's one of the most shocking and fascinating videos with so much insight as to what was coming. And if we watch this video, then it's very clear everything that's happening at the moment and how it was planned. So I've just got a couple of announcements really about the last couple of shows. I did a live stream and we called it a global cult for everyone. And there's one called Know the Enemy Within. Yes, a global cult for everyone. This kind of follows on from that very well, because we're talking about a global cult here, the fourth world, and we're going to get into that as the show goes along. But do look at those two articles on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net. One's in the latest show section, one's actually in the articles section. A global cult for everyone, and Know the Enemy Within. And you will find so much information linked to those shows. There is so much in there. And for people who actually really do want to find out what's going on and be able to respond to it correctly, that's what these shows are for. They're not for people who just want entertainment. And the great thing about these shows is they don't attract people who just want entertainment. But one other thing, there's a link, and it's called The Man Who Saw the Future. And that link is in the chat, and it's underneath this video in the information. I will also put it on there as a pinned post over the next few days. Do remember that you can find all of our shows on Odyssey and Spreaker. Everything goes to Odyssey after it's gone to Spreaker. All the evidence you need for the shows that we're going to be putting out over the next few weeks is in the archive, because we are actually carrying on from what we've been talking about, because what we do is put the bigger picture together. So we'll carry on now. And yes, now we've got that out of the way, the ultimate aim, of course, is a psychological assault, and there will be no first, second, and third worlds. The collective consciousness is what we're talking about. They call it the wilderness of the mind, or the lostness of the mind. And several weeks ago, you could still find that on the internet, the lostness of the mind. It's something talked about by so-called mystics, but it's actually a globalist project, so that everybody is in one place with the same thoughts, the same motivations. And that's what we can see through the UN Agenda 21 impositions, which are so obvious now, and we've been talking about for so many years. But we're talking about borderless minds here with nothing in them. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how people have no real interest in real history and what's going on at the moment, of course, in the Middle East? People still do not get the real and the stated goals. The cover story is so easy to take apart when we look at these events, if we know really what the rules of engagement are. Basically, blame the other side, gaslight everybody, and lie all the time. Yes, the lostness of the mind. And this was going to be achieved through lies, drugs, inducing fear and intense psychological pain. We're going back here to the late 1980s and a document called Our Common Future, and a man called George Hunt, who was at the first Wilderness Congress, the first World Wilderness Congress in 1987, where they set up a thing called a Global Environmental Facility, which was basically going to lend lots of money to the third world countries so that they could bankrupt them, take their land under sustainable development or renewable energy systems that were never meant to work. And George Hunt had the inside on this. He had a website called thebigbadbank.com. It's still there. And he was urging people to rise up and take action in the 1980s. And we're a long way from the 1980s now, and people did not rise up or take action. However, that does not mean that this simplistic template system cannot be taken apart, and that's why we do these shows. I'm just going to carry on. Great, there's a few people in. That's really good, because I'm not really advertising these. And when I mentioned on that advertisement for last Sunday's show, which was basically because we didn't do a show last Sunday because I had all this other stuff to put out, I thought it was going to be on Wednesday, but it's actually on Thursday. So at least people are here. That's good. And it will stay in the archive. We're talking about the cult of Gaia here. That's what we're talking about. The saving of the planet, the herding of the masses into sacrificing themselves on the altar of sustainability, the new financial looting system, which is based on the biggest fraud in world history. All will be collectivized into this cult and its religion. That's called the wilderness of the mind, the fourth world. Nobody will be able to have separate thoughts. Nobody will be able to think. It's merely a new control system to which the gullible and the trusting will fall in line with, because they believe the stated goals over the real goals. And of course, this is a follow-on from communism, and it's a strong elements of Marxism. You could call it Marxism because it uses all the rules of Marxism, but it's called communitarianism. And what is most important is the question, will you allow them to do it? This is what George Hunt was asking at the time. I'm going to play this video a bit later on, and you will find it on the internet anyway. It's called UNCED, UNCED, the elite plan well ahead. We had a bit of problem with streaming last time, so I'm going to put this video up, and I may also just upload it to the channel. It's one of the most important videos for people who are looking at the present system. Everything you need is in there. It's shocking. It's all from the horse's mouth. It's from people like Edmund de Rothschild, investment banker, David Lang, and the quotes that they make are all there. So this is a historic record of what was really going on. Of course, with Maurice Strong heading the UNCED conference, and he put into action the whole of the climate change agenda, including this new financial system, which is now being implemented very rapidly. And it's all going to be done through the New Age and the Gaia cult, saving the planet basically for the World Bank and the UN governance system. That's what it's all about. I know we've talked about this a lot before, but unless people grasp this, then there is no way forward. The system is known as the fourth world. And just going to give you some quotes now from Our Common Future. You can find the whole of this document on the free books page at windowsontheworld.net. And it's a very useful tool to understand what they meant by global governance. We have talked about this before. The reason we've talked about it before, of course, is because it's so important. So some quotes from Our Common Future. We're going to get into maybe a bit more of that later on, but this is the gist of what they were saying. Ensuring a sustainable level of population, which means population control, but mainly reduction. Reorientating technology and managing risk. Merging environment and economics in decision making. That's where the merger came in. The merging of the environment and economics. A genius stroke, get people to save the planet or think they're saving the planet, get every country in the world on board, and basically use corporations to loot the entire financial systems of the world and have it all running under the World Bank. And as George Hunt said, under one global bank, which is basically like a carbon bank. They don't actually need to do that in a way now, because when they set up the Global Environmental Facility in 1987, that was to lend money to the third world countries to bankrupt them, which it has quite successfully done with sustainable development impositions and renewables. And we're going to see more of this. We're going to see the electric cars failing because the system will not support them. They're setting on fire everywhere. They're going to be controlled through organizations. So you'll just be carpooling in an electric car and walking everywhere. That's the whole point of what's going on with ULEZ and everything else that's been imposed. Remember, the UK is the only net zero country in the world. It signed up under the Climate Change Act in 2008, and it's being dealt with in the harshest way possible, because the City of London has to bring the UK down before they can do this properly in the rest of the world, because the UK is going to be their shining example of sustainable development. So the show link we're going to be talking about tonight, again, is The Man Who Saw the Future. Go to windowsontheworld.net, or you can look under this video and you'll find it. George Hunt basically talking about the globalist warming action plan. And we've actually got the video with a remastered audio, and we're going to play that. And it's just been cleaned up by someone from our Discord group. It was great of them to do that. So basically, let's get into the context of this. The planning of societal change takes place decades before the public see any signs of the implementation, which is where we're going to get back to our common future. I've put many quotes out of that. And yes, that's the other point I wanted to make. I have a show which brings all the quotes in. I'm going to be putting that up over the next couple of days, something I missed out at the beginning there. Yes, of course, when people do catch on, it's too late. And by this time, it's being sold to them in the form of a benefit. The public are not excluded, though, from looking for these ongoing plans. If I can find out about it, anybody can. But they are not looking for them. So do not look for and do not see the signs of change until it's possibly too late. Most will never be able to see the plans behind these changes, of course, as they believe the cover story. And that is one of the most difficult things to get across to anybody, the real versus the stated goals. And with everything that's imposed, there's a cover story and a real story. The real story has nothing to do with the cover story, and the gullible masses always fall for the cover story. The change has to be brought about on the back of something which appears beneficial or absolutely necessary. In other words, we have to have this voluntarily through people wanting to virtue signal to save the planet, or have it imposed on them. Those two things are very paramount. And of course, then you train hundreds of thousands of agents, which they've already done through sustainable development, which are in every country in the world now. And they're basically training what they call future leaders. We were talking about this since 2010. It's increased and increased and increased. And the organizations which we talked about are no longer actually needed, because the implementation now is being done through all academia. So yes, the use of the words crisis and emergencies. yeah, we know a lot about that last couple of years. These crises are not crises, of course, and these emergencies are not emergencies. No proof has ever been forthcoming, of course, that they are. You have to ask your local council why they locked you down, because they had to have evidence that there was an existential threat, which of course they never had. Remember that. That's one of the most important things. So the institutes of learning and the whole world of academia are not only working to destroy knowledge, they are complicit in this propaganda war. Recently, students who connected Hamas with Israel were dropped from a law firm. Cancel culture is basically Bolshevik totalitarianism. I'm referring to some notes here, so I'll stay on track, because I tended to look at the comments last time and react to them. Maybe I should just do that at one particular point, but they whiz by so quick, I miss half of them. So let's go back now to the World Wilderness Congress in 1987. And George Hunt talked about the Brundtland Report, which is, of course, the document which became our common future. And we're talking about Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Prime Minister of Norway and a member of the World Communist Party. And she's mentioned by Edmund de Rothschild in this film that was made by George Hunt that we're going to play. So I'll let that do the talking. So let's see what George Hunt actually said. And first of all, why he was there. He got into this World Wilderness Congress completely by accident. His son wanted to be a ranger, I think. And he was involved in sustainable development in a way that he was a bit naive about, because he didn't realize what it was about until he went to this conference, because he thought it was all about green issues. Of course, it's not. And he died in 2013. And he was the only person who actually spoke out about this at the time, which is why it's so important to remember him. And in 1987, George Hunt said, I really feel it is not too late. He wanted to expose this so that people would light fires of indignation around the world to stop these people. Those were his very words. And of course, they haven't, not yet. This is what he asked. Will they blame the false, that's my intersection there, environmental holocaust on you? Of course they will. That's the whole point of what they were doing. By 92, it would be the problem of humanity. Of course, we go to the Club of Rome and their first global revolution report, which stated that the common enemy of mankind is man himself. So behind net zero, are the British social engineers, the followers of Cecil Rhodes. They talked at this conference of the extension of British rule around the world. This is why the Fourth World Wilderness and the City of London being the main driver of sustainable development in the financial world are so important. Britain is the key. It is the example being made to the rest of the world. So what they said at this conference was, Lilliputians of a lesser race will bring us down. They know nothing of the Anglo-European system. So these people are not only totalitarians and want communism for the whole world, they are absolutely racist as well, and they are elitists. The problem they have, of course, is that they are not as intelligent as they think they are. They are just very cunning. Edmund de Rothschild talked in 1987, the World Wilderness Congress, of the Second Marshall Plan. In other words, the refinancing of the world through the banks, through the World Bank. Third world debt relief, he talked about, for stable economic development, which means bringing every country to its knees. The ones that need to be brought to their knees, of course, the Western countries already outsourced most of their manufacturing and business from the Lima Declaration onwards in 1975, when the West was going to be brought down and the East was going to rise. Now, of course, it doesn't matter because we're entering the fourth world. This is where the wilderness of the mind takes over and sustainable development rules. So sustainable development schemes that were never meant to work are operating all over the world, resulting in massive debt and land grabs everywhere. From the 1970s, the World Economic Forum were drivers of it. And this is the question that was asked by Maurice Strong at that World Wilderness Congress. Will the rich countries take responsibility for their emissions and pollution? The consensus of those people there was they would not do it. So they would have to be brought into line. And Maurice Strong was the co-chair of the World Economic Forum in 1987. And what he said by 92 at the Rio conference was the only hope for the planet is that the industrialized civilizations collapse. And isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? So the world order, basically, what people call the New World Order, is this fourth world beyond the first, second, and third worlds. They no longer exist. A borderless Pangaea of the mind, people brought into this new age cult of Gaia and worship of the earth through pain, drugs, propaganda. Those are the drivers. The borderless wilderness of the mind, the world where there is a monoculture controlled by technocrats, no real history, no real future. We see the destruction of history everywhere. This is exactly what the Marxists did. This is what communism did. It destroys history. It destroys culture. That is what these people want to do. So back to the World Wilderness Congress and up to Rio 92. So spreading these fears will justify monstrous, inoperative greenhouse effect projects for the greedy rich and their big fat contracts. That was a quote from George Hunt. And he said that Rothschild is the leader of both international finance, and this pseudo-environmental movement is resting on two pillars: the claim of anthropogenic global warming and that of population control. Of course, the Rothschilds are the leaders in the carbon trading market. They put out the document. I've actually got it linked in the article. I think it's in The Man Who Saw the Future. You can download from Rothschild Bank London their carbon trading agenda policy. They were going to lead the world in this, of course. In the document, they defined greenhouse emissions as the new form of social market and stated that such a market has to be established on a world basis, coordinated by an international institution with a constitution to match. This is exactly what Our Common Future laid out, that they would need to impose a hierarchical structure because countries, sovereign nations, could not implement what was needed for this global action plan. So perhaps it might be regarded as having wider benefits than merely saving the planet. Perhaps it might be the basis of a new world order, one that is not based on trade and or conflict and resolution, This is all what came out of this carbon trading emissions document in the 90s, Rothschild investments. Perhaps one can see a way to achieve this goal, it says, through leadership. In other words, training future leaders, vision, leadership, vision, and some marginal, get this, and manageable renunciation of national sovereignty. How the world might just get there. This is what they thought. This is how the world might get there. Implicit in all the above is that nations have to be prepared to subordinate to a certain extent some element of their sovereignty to this world initiative. I'll read that out again. Implicit in all the above is that nations have to be prepared to subordinate to a certain extent some element of their sovereignty to this world initiative, global governance under the World Bank, under sustainable development, and of course, the UN and its global governance system includes all of its specialized agencies, the IMF, the World Bank, the International Postal Union. Go check it out. It's in the 1947 Charter. So this is what Rothschild Bank said. This is their spokesman. He stated that regulating this would be a World Environment Authority. And of course, we've had that. Didn't Mark Carney head up the Climate Related Disclosures Fund, forcing every company and corporation into the world to be in this sustainable development trap? Yes, he did. And now it's bigger because it's in every part of legislation. But basically, it would be this World Environment Authority would be operating from a world city with world skills and world facilities. In other words, City of London. He then notes in a section entitled "A Natural Role for London." London is a world financial centre, possibly the world financial centre, is what they said. And that London would make a compelling case to house the World Environmental Agency. So now let's get on to the Global Environmental Facility. It was established in 1991. The Global Environmental Facility is today the largest funder of projects to improve the global environment. Yes, masses of debt being created in third world countries, forcing them to take sustainable development implementations, and of course, renewable package that aren't meant to work. They're meant to fail. This is the whole point of this environmental system. All it's about is taking control of the countries. The Global Environmental Facility has allocated $8.8 billion. This was at the time, supplemented by more than $38.7 billion in co-financing for more than 2,400 projects in more than 165, yes, developing countries. The GEF partnership includes 10 agencies. It's worth knowing about these. The United Nations Development Programme, that's David Rothschild, who's the consultant for Nigeria. They put that in brackets. The UN Environmental Programme, UNEP, of course, which was started by Maurice Strong, the oil billionaire who created global warming. The World Bank, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which is a Rockefeller partner organization. The UN Industrial Development Organization, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who are behind so much stuff. They are behind a lot of these false and state-backed demonstrations and protests. We've covered that over the years. They've been behind many of these controlled opposition protests. The Inter-American Development Bank, David Rothschild, consultant to the Inter-American Development Bank, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. So these are all under the UN, under sustainable development, and they're all under the Global Environmental Facility, which is a trustee of the World Bank. So the Global Environmental Facility carries out the wishes of the World Bank. It is a trustee of the World Bank, and it administers on behalf of the World Bank. So we're now going into the man who saw the future. So in this, perhaps the most important document of the decade on the future of the world, the urgency of changing certain policy decisions. some of which threaten the very survival of the human race, is made abundantly clear. This is their rhetoric. For the World Wilderness Congress of '87, we've had many more since then, by the way. Wild 11 was actually in 2020 and it was all done online. But in that, they talked about managing 50% of the world's oceans. So the seas were, in fact, Ghislaine Maxwell was involved in this. She had a project where she was fronting it all. She was fronting this management of the global commons. There was an organization, look it up, it's still on YouTube. Put in Ghislaine Maxwell environmental, it'll come up. I did a show on it. I can't now remember what it was called. It was an NGO she was working for. They're all NGOs, of course. That's how they infiltrate, through the NGOs. So some quotes from our common future. We've had that. Yes, we can move on. And we'll get to that. Yes, we've had ensuring a sustainable level of population, reorientating technology and managing risk, merging environment and economics in decision making. So by now, we all know what that means. And it also said in our common future, the UN Environmental Programme, United Nations Environmental Programme, should be strengthened as the principal source on environmental data assessment and the agent for change and international cooperation on critical environment and national resource protection issues. That's an incredibly important paragraph. The UNEP should be strengthened as the principal source on environmental data. What happened in 1988? A year later, they set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which controls all of this data for the governments of the world. Of course, we've covered that in great detail. We've covered the story of Niels Axel Morner, who is no longer with us and who did many shows with me years ago. And he had resigned from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for their scientific fraud. And you can find his letters of resignation and you can find what he said about this new global cult of Gaia on the free books page at windowsontheworld.net. Have a look at this stuff. It will empower you when you're talking to people who want to oppose what you're saying. If you can back up what you're saying with documents, you can shut down any argument, which is very useful. Otherwise, you're going to be gaslighted for the rest of your life if you know this stuff. And I do know about that, by the way. Let's carry on with another quote. United Nations Environmental Project Earthwatch program should be at the center of leadership to the UN system on risk assessment. So they trained hundreds of thousands of people into this cult. A new international program for cooperation among largely non-governmental organizations. NGOs run the lot. Non-governmental organizations, scientific bodies, and industry groups should therefore be established for the purpose. Okay, in the UK, look what you've got, Sustrans. They get millions off central government to lobby in your local borough. The councils are working with them to do surveys. This is part of the UN global governance system. These are not surveys. These are just impositions from above masquerading as community. Of course, there is no community. They are the community. It's their community. It's called communitarianism, a totalitarian system masquerading as community, but it is mainly and merely an imposition from above, a totalitarian system which is brought in by a thing called consensus, which means that everybody looks as though they've agreed, and most people are finding out now that they didn't. So what are you going to do about it? You need to know this stuff. So yes, it says making difficult choices will depend on widespread public support and involvement of an informed public and NGOs, scientific community and industry. There you go. They're telling you everything they've done. They've captured academia. They've infiltrated every country through these NGOs for sustainable development. They've captured the scientific community. Look at the idiots they've got spouting this nonsense on the BBC, Attenborough, Brian Cox. These are all their agents. So the World Bank is presently, it says, this is, of course, the Global Environmental Facility, and we're talking about our common future, this blueprint for world governance from 1987, put together by an ex-communist, actually still is a communist, Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Prime Minister of Norway. And Edmund de Rothschild really had a lot of good things to say about her, as you'll find out in this video. The World Bank is presently reorientating its programs towards greater environmental concerns. This should be accompanied by a fundamental commitment to sustainable development by the bank. It is also essential that the regional development banks and the IMF incorporate similar objectives in their policies and programs. The changes in human attitudes that we call for, remember, they call for, depend on a vast campaign of education, of course, meaning indoctrination, debate, meaning, of course, Delphi technique and consensus, and public participation, which means steering the public into the intended outcome through their NGOs and favoured agents. Again, look at Sustrans. That's just one group, but they are very important in what's going on. So basically, you use this cycling group as a front for global governance. That's what it's about. That's why when they say walk, cycle, enjoy, they mean it. No private transport. That's what it means. There must be more redistribution of power, they say. There must be more redistribution of power. From where? From the global governance system, not by sovereign nations, of course. Okay, so it says, how are individuals in the real world to be persuaded, wait for it, or made to act in the common interest? How are individuals in the real world to be persuaded or made to act in the common interest? Here we go, the wilderness of the mind. Through propaganda, through lies, through gaslighting, and through this controlling of all narratives and funneling people into the end result. Most important, effective participation in decision-making processes by local communities. Is your local council. This is from Our Common Future 1987, template for world governance. Effective participation in decision-making processes by local communities can help them articulate and effectively enforce the common interest. Enforce the common interest. Are you finding that the common interest is being enforced in your area? Did anybody ask you whether you wanted all your roads closed? No, it's called enforcing the common interest, all from Our Common Future 1987. Also, a couple of other documents if you're really interested. Our Global Neighbourhood 1996, covered it for years. And on YouTube, you can look for Enablers of Global Governance from 2019. That's actually one of our shows. I think you can find it in the Spreaker archive, but look for Enablers of Global Governance 2019. Actually, that was featured in our Global Governance article. That's actually called Enablers of Global Governance, and the quotes are in there from the people, and I used that for a show. But have a look what they're saying, and that was 2019. They're basically saying they're going to force everyone to get involved with this, or they're going to be completely marginalized. Any country that doesn't take the bait is basically going to be attacked. So following the document and the action plan that was laid out in Our Common Future and the World Wilderness Congress, there was the Rio Earth Summit of 1992, and their logo was a hand, and it had the world in its hands, and it said, in our hands. George Hunt will actually go more into this. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a quick look at the chat because it's really good. Thanks for the encouragement out there. I'm getting so marginalized out here when I do need support, because sometimes when I do this, it kind of drains me. I think, is it going to be worth it? Is this worth it? And then I get the response from the people who do listen to the show, and then I know it is worth it. So that's what keeps me going. And please do support us. You can do that on the homepage at winnersontheworld.net. You know, to keep this going, it is quite a lot of not only effort, because I don't mind the effort, everything's free on the website, but what we depend on is just getting a little bit of help from the public to keep it going, because it's actually quite costly, the whole thing. Great. Okay, I'm just having a quick look through these. Hello from Toronto. Good evening. Yeah, great. Okay, there's plenty of people. Oh, Sean's in. That's great. Yeah, a lot of that's great. That's great. Just get this show out to as many people as you can, really. That's what I ask you to do. I know that this information seems to be above the heads of a lot of people, but it's actually really simple. I mean, if you look at Our Common Future, you can see what they're doing. But of course, a lot of the so-called alternative media has dumbed down their audience to the point where they just want to listen to nonsense. And you people out there, I know that, don't want to listen to nonsense, which is why you're here, which is great. Okay. Yes, there is no mass awakening, just mass immigration and psyops. Well, a psychological operation, of course, is the wilderness of the mind, the fourth world. A lot of people are already in the fourth world. We have to defend our personal sovereignty, our personal history, and our personal intellect from this assault, because this is an assault on the intellect. The fourth world is an assault on your intellect. And these people who are imposing it are way above that. They're just using it as a business plan to control the world. Okay. Great. Yeah, the good comments. Yes. Yeah, I'm just having a quick read through these. McCarthy plan. Good evening. Yes. Yes. Good point, McCarthy plan. Nationalism, correctly understood and presented, is a fundamental to world peace and a cleaner natural environment. Of course it is. Of course it is. That's actually what is the main point here. Globalism is all about a ruling, self-governing elite who basically govern through NGOs and infiltration of other countries. You know, anyway, we've said enough on that. Madeleine says, we need to act and stop dreaming. Nobody is coming to help us, and the solution is in our hands. There you go. But according to the UN Global Governance System, the world was in their hands by 1992. So that's very important to know. Nobody's coming to save you. The whole of the new age, the whole of the fake positivity, the whole of this fake awakening is the wilderness of the mind. It's all a globalist plan. It's part of the plan. The new age positivity and hopium was all born out of this destruction of reality and this imposition of the fourth world wilderness, the lostness of the mind. Yes, good stuff here. Good stuff. Manny says, I'm surrounded by trolls and zombies. I know how that feels. I know how that feels. I mean, when I gave them the good news about what was happening during those COVID protests, that they were being essentially steered, a lot of these conspiracy people really turned on me. And now they don't want to talk about it because they know everything I said was true. It's in an article called COVID Protest Social Engineers, which covers the whole history of this stuff. The globalists need the anti-globalists to implement their policies. They need everybody. So the anti-globalists have nothing to do. So they unwittingly implement the policies of the globalists. We've covered this. I mean, the whole point of these organizations, even if you look on the other side, Extinction Rebellion is a government intelligence services operation. We proved that in our shows. We have the evidence. George Barder, who basically stopped protesting in Parliament Square by removing Brian Hoare and Barbara Tucker, the peace campaigners who were there for years, was part of an MI5 operation. And he was also part of Climate Camp Action, which was part of an undercover police operation to steal the finances of Occupy. And George Barder then became the managing director of Compassionate Revolution, which is the holding company for Extinction Rebellion. Yes, this is how it works. This is what Our Common Future was talking about. By agency, controlling everything through agency. So, great. This is good. This is good. Great comments. Very, very encouraging that people are here. And yes, false light awakening. That's what this is all about. The false light, the fourth world, the wilderness of the mind, the lostness of the mind is this fake awakening, which has been promoted by most of the people who believe themselves to be the top end of the so-called conspiracy circus, but not the listeners to this show, of course. So without further ado, I'm now going to play this video. Okay, let's just check. But oh, right, okay. Because I signed out of this, I've actually got to add the video file again. It'll only take me a minute. It's on the desktop here. But thanks again to everybody. I mean, the comments here are just really good. And I'm going to play this now. So
today is May 1st, 1992. The subject of this video message is the UNCED Earth Summit. the meeting which is to begin on June 1st, 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. The acronym UNCED stands for the United Nations Committee for Environment and Development. It is pronounced UNCED, and perhaps indicating the secret agenda of this meeting. This is the logo of the Earth Summit. This is not a dove in their Earth Summit logo. It is a hand, and the hand is holding the world with the slogan, "In our hands," alongside of it. In whose hands? Who is the we in this motto? The hands of the world order. These elitists convened this UNCED meeting in the first place, and for a bad purpose. This video will show strong evidence that the persons running the UNCED Earth Summit are actually setting a net to place the power over the Earth and its peoples into their hands. Brave, bold deeds by the citizenry are needed quickly. Once the government signs their treaties, their citizens are de jure in the hands of the world order. There's that motto again, in our hands. Whose hands? The same world order families that planned World War I and World War II, that tricked the third world countries to borrow funds and rack up enormous debts. The same world order that stole much of the money borrowed by Africans and other nations and hid it in Geneva banks. They are the persons who financed Hitler, manufactured the Holocaust, and managed to blame the terrible deeds on the German people. They can be credited with manipulating famines in Ethiopia and elsewhere, and purposely creating war and debt to bring societies into their control. The world order crowd are not a nice group of people. My name is George Hunt. I'm speaking to you from a video studio in Boulder, Colorado. I have attended some of the meetings and caucuses leading to the UNCED Earth Summit. I am a business consultant and a college teacher in small business management. I own an environment company too, and am very familiar with the environment hypocrisy that the world order crowd has taken over the environment movement. I am aware of their plans. Please pardon me as I read my script. I'm not a professional actor, and my memory will not serve me with the things that I want to say. The world environment movement will soon be in the hands of the world order if you and others do not respond with action after you view this videotape. Action may constitute showing this to 5 others. It may constitute showing it to a judge down the street or a city councilman who you know in your town. Pray for guidance, hoping that something good might come of your actions. Somebody is going to set the spark off. I really feel that it is not too late. When I served as an official host at a key environment meeting in Denver, Colorado in 1987, I was surprised to see David Rockefeller, Edmund de Rothschild, Secretary of State Baker, then Secretary of the Treasury, Maurice Strong, Waste Company Chairman and EPA Administrator William Ruckelshaus, UN Secretary General in Geneva, McNeil, and various World Bank and IMF officials there. What were the rich elite and bankers doing at an Environment Congress? Listen carefully. I will now attempt to show you how their enactments will work against you. Trust and foundation income is the cornerstone of the world order. They command politicians to do their bidding, and presidents, judges, and legislators lick their boots. Their swollen egos and bellies are never satisfied, and their lust for more is insatiable. Now world power and authority is in their grasp. Are we going to give it to them without a confrontation? Or, like they did to the Germans, will they blame the environment holocaust on you and get away with it? What is the World Summit Meeting, and who is behind it? The UNCED World Summit, that's UNCED World Summit, is a key event in a series of environment meetings which have occurred since 1972. Maurice Strong, a UN official and an employee of the Rockefeller and Rothschild Trusts and Projects, convened the first Congress in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972. 20 years later, Maurice Strong is the Secretary General and convener of UNCED. In the 1970s and 1980s, numerous conferences created political action decrees, eventually to lead to the UNCED Earth Summit. I attended 2 meetings in Colorado in 1987 and 1991. Friends attended others in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Des Moines. Here is a paper from the Des Moines meeting where Maurice Strong was in charge. Representative Gephardt's telephone number appears on the meeting documents. Here are some phrases from the document of the Secretariat for World Order, which were distributed at the Des Moines UNCED meeting. We are the living sponsors of the great Cecil Rhodes' will of 1877, in which Rhodes devoted his fortune to the extension of British rule throughout the world and colonization by British subjects of the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, the valley of the Euphrates, the islands of Cyprus and Candia, the whole of South America, the islands of the Pacific not heretofore possessed by Great Britain, the whole of the Malay archipelago, the seaboard of China and Japan, the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. We stand with Lord Milner's credo. We too are British race patriots, and our patriotism is the speech, the traditions, the principles, the aspirations of the British race. Do you fear to take this stand at the very last moment when this purpose can be realized? Do you not see that failure now is to be pulled down by the billions of Lilliputians of lesser race who care little or nothing for the Anglo-Saxon system? Copies of this document are distributed to you with this videotape. At the Fourth World Congress meeting in 1987, some other bad remarks about common people were made. I'm going to play them for you now. For instance, here is David Lang, a Montreal international investment banker, one of their pack, decreeing that these environment and economic activities of the world order not be shared with the public. He calls us cannon fodder. Listen to this.
I suggest, therefore, that this be solved not through a democratic process. That would take too long and devour far too much of the funds to educate the cannon fodder, unfortunately, which populates the earth. We have to take almost an elitist program that we can see beyond our swollen bellies and look to the future in time frames and in results which are not easily understood or which can be, with intellectual honesty, be reduced down to some kind of simplistic definition.
Does it make you feel uncomfortable that the arrogant rich are close to complete rule over the United States, Canada, and other countries? Here's more. The decrees leading to the Earth Summit were dictated without debate or opportunity for dissent. The treaties the world order once signed at UNCED will supersede national laws. Yet I saw the major decrees at the Fourth World Congress dictated into existence by Edmund de Rothschild. You can hear it too. Listen to him dictate. Rothschild got these major decrees into the United Nations resolutions without debate or challenge.
But perhaps this conference might like to think more about the Marshall Plan, which had been mooted and put forward very tentatively at the Denver conference. And perhaps this might be the keynote of what you have heard today and what perhaps you might like in some perhaps amended form to have put forward. At this conference, recognizing the needs to protect our ecological and environmental heritage within the concept of the World Wilderness Congress, World Wildlife Fund, and all other bodies involved in the preservation of life on our planet, asked the Prime Minister of Norway, Right Honourable the Gro Harlem Brundtland, as one of the world's leaders of a greatly respected community, to be the promoter of this International Conservation Bank. By her Brundtland report, which has been widely circulated to world leaders, she could follow up this report with the recommendations to promote a second Marshall Plan, the third world debt relief, and finance for a stable development.
Nobody at that caucus mentioned a second world Marshall Plan or a new currency system to finance a stable development. The World Conservation Bank had not been thoroughly discussed at all. I was denied the opportunity to openly challenge Rothschild's remarks at the caucus by the World Conservation Bank president and meeting chairman, I. Michael Sweetman. In world politics, the names of First World, Second World, Third World, and Fourth World are used to describe blocks of political entities. The First World is the capitalist countries of Europe and North America. They are industrial and are therefore the world's biggest polluters. The Second World is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries. Do you remember Rothschild referring to a Second World Marshall Plan? He was speaking of the Soviet bloc countries, not a second Marshall Plan. He was speaking of the Soviet bloc countries and that they will be rescued by First World money. Europe was granted huge sums of money by the Marshall Plan in 1949, and the Second World will receive billions of North American money in this repeat performance. And guess what banking family will act as the main money changers for the Russian ruble? Possibly absconding with billions. The Rothschild Group, of course. Rothschild made these remarks back in 1987, 2 years before the Berlin Wall was torn down. He was bragging to us that he knew the Soviet regime would collapse. Here are some April 1992 news articles about the progress of Rothschild's Second World Marshall Plan. They come from the New York Times, and the world order is right on time. Here is a April 15th, 1992 New York Times headline. $44 billion needed to aid ex-Soviets in 1992, IMF says. It's needed for a shift to the free market. Most of the help would finance imports of food and spare parts for 15 republics. My response to that is, sure. Another article in the international edition of the New York Times, Wednesday, April 29, 1992, had this to say about Rothschild's Marshall Plan. Although there has been much talk about building a new political order in the post-Cold War world, the events here in the last few days make clear that a new economic order is also rapidly emerging. Washington cannot bankroll a Marshall Plan for the former Soviet republics because the task is so enormous and because the American economy is debt-ridden and no longer so dominant. That is why Washington has asked the IMF to run the rescue operations, which are expected to cost $44 billion this year. Well, Rothschild really called it, didn't he? Soon after these remarks were made, the Rothschilds reopened the Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt, Germany, after 50 years of closure. They are now conveniently available to stabilize the Russian ruble with money from the West. Question: do we really want to send North American money abroad so the Rothschilds can make multi-billion-dollar windfalls on the currency trades? Let's talk about the Third World now. The Third World are those countries who have emerged since World War II. Young and easily fooled, the World Bank under Robert S. McNamara played bad tricks on them, spiriting billions of loan dollars back to Swiss bank accounts through fictitious African addresses. They now owe $1.5 trillion to the world banking system with nothing to show for it except poverty and cruel loan collections. Maurice Strong has suggested an ominous scenario at the UNCED meeting, which could break out if his words are to be believed. He says in this article in West magazine that a fight may erupt between the first world polluters and the third world poor. Here is how he describes it. Each year, he explains as background to the telling of his novel's plot, the World Economic Forum convenes in Davos, Switzerland. Over 1,000 CEOs, prime ministers, finance ministers, and leading academics gather in February to attend meetings and set economic agendas for the year ahead. With this as a setting, Maurice Strong then says, what if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it? He's really talking about the UNCED meeting. And Strong, driving as I take notes, looks at me. Then his eyes go back to Highway 17 on the way from Alamosa, Colorado to his New Age ranch in Crestone, Colorado. He says, the man who founded the United Nations Environment Program and who wrote parts of the Brundtland Report and who in 1992 will try to get the world's leaders meeting in Brazil to sign just such an agreement savors the questions hanging in the air. Will they do it? Will the rich countries agree to reduce their impact on the environment? Will they agree to save the earth? Strong resumes his story. The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it. They won't change. So, in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? This group of world leaders, he continues, form a secret society to bring about an economic collapse. It's February. They're all at Davos. These aren't terrorists. They're world leaders. They have positioned themselves in the world's commodity and stock markets. They've engineered, using their access to stock exchanges and computers and gold supplies, a panic. Then they prevent the world stock market from closing. They jam the gears. They hire mercenaries who hold the rest of the world leaders at Davos as hostages. The markets can't close. The rich countries, and Strong makes a slight motion with his fingers as if he were flicking a cigarette butt out the window. I sit there spellbound. This is not any storyteller talking. This is Maurice Strong. He knows these world leaders. He is, in fact, co-chairman of the Council of the World Economic Forum. He sits at the fulcrum of power. He is in a position to do it. I probably shouldn't be saying things like this, he says. Highway 17 cuts straight across the desert, heading out of the land of dreams. When the truth is finally told, Maurice Strong fears the world will come to this. No secret societies, no hostage takings at Davos, but it will come to the same conclusion. The global economy, sapped by credit and debt loads and environmental disasters, will simply come unstuck. And nothing, not even the inspiration of the Baka, can save humankind from itself. They see the struggles and problems at the Baka as reflections of the problems assaulting the planet. They fear the Baka will be, at best, an oasis in the desert of the future, and at worst, a place where dreams die. Even if Strong is fictionalizing and imagining, why would he even suggest these things? The point remains something important is going to happen at the UNCED Earth Summit. The fourth world. No one really talks about the fourth world, do they? That's because we haven't seen the fourth world come about. The fourth world came up in the title of the Congress I attended. It was called the Fourth World Wilderness Congress. Maurice Strong said it was called the Fourth World because it was the fourth one of these environment congresses that Edmund de Rothschild had created. I learned later that the world order refers to the coming one world government as the fourth world. World control by the world order, where there is no more first, second, and third world. Just a boundaryless planet, which is called the fourth world wilderness. Yogis and shamans refer to it as the fourth world wilderness, the lostness of the mind. The lostness of the mind refers to the collective consciousness. Persons will be coerced through lies, drugs, fear, and pain to surrender themselves, their egos, to the collective consciousness. The fourth world will be a return to a society much like the Caesars or Babylon or the Fourth Reich. Within the fictionalized societies described in Huxley's Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited and Orwell's classic 1984. We will flourish with only a whimper. The world order wants to create a new society out of the ashes of chaos. A collectivist fourth world complete with a collectivist religion, collectivist finance, and unchecked world national socialism. The world order will offer Gaia, Mother Earth, to the masses as the big brother image to worship in the fourth world. Maurice Strong has already set up a 140,000-acre project in Crestone, Colorado, to develop this Earth religion system. Projects are funded by the Rockefeller Fund, among other foundations. The Earth Summit will link environment with industry. The lords of the UNCED conference will be the masters of who gets what and when if we don't do something about it quickly. Who leads the environment movement? The convener of the summit, Maurice Strong, identifies Baron Edmund de Rothschild as the creator of the environment movement. Here are his own words describing Rothschild as the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand and growth and development on the other. Listen carefully as Maurice Strong introduces Baron de Rothschild.
So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand, and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rothschild.
Maurice, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said, and I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me.
Rothschild is the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand, that's the thesis, and growth and development on the other, that's the antithesis. He very clearly admits that the Rothschild combination, including the Rockefellers and most world capitalists, aim to control the environment and development movement as the synthesis. Power will converge into their hands through the Rio Conference. The synthesis, the head of the power, merges into the House of Rothschild. Another speaker at the Fourth World Conference was David Rockefeller, world energy capitalist and banker. He was named Mr. Growth and Development at the meeting. His counterpart, William Ruckelshaus, organizer of the EPA and creator of its laws under Presidents Ford and Reagan, was dubbed Mr. Environment. Here is a picture of the chuckling antagonist at the meeting. Mr. Environment Ruckelshaus is the CEO and chairman of the board for BFI, Browning Ferris Industries, one of the largest private environment companies in the world. The hypocrisy is that Ruckelshaus, as EPA chief, made the very laws by which his waste company, BFI, is becoming rich. Hypocrisy number two is that Ruckelshaus and Maurice Strong were key investors in American Water Development, a company which tried to circumvent Colorado water laws and gain control of one of the largest underground reservoirs of water in the world. Here's an excerpt from a video interview where I explain what they did. And I did a survey of the people down in the San Luis Valley, and I sent letters out to these farmers last December, and I said, what will happen if Maurice Strong and William Ruckelshaus and others pull water, 200,000 acre-feet of water out of the San Luis Valley without one hesitation. It was unanimous that their land will turn into a wasteland. It'll turn into a desert. So here we have people at an Environment Congress that are then waltzing 200 miles south of Estes Park down in the San Luis Valley of Colorado that want to suck the aquifers dry and turn it into a desert. The hypocrisy is so deep. They failed in their attempt because the people learned what they were doing and defeated them. Here is a newspaper article that shows their defeat. I hope we can do it again around the UNCED meeting. Let's hear a little more from Maurice Strong and Edmund de Rothschild and lock in on what kind of people are running the UNCED Summit Meeting. Here's the part where Rothschild says that projects launched to save the environment will be inoperative. He says it quickly, but he says inoperative. That is, they will not work. And listen to Rothschild snidely suggest that we build dry ice machines and ship up the dry ice to the North and South Poles to keep them from melting.
Perhaps it could be possible to utilize CO2, carbon dioxide, one of its main causes, to manufacture dry ice, to maintain the polar caps and the actual temperature of the ice there, and maintain their present temperature. Innovative and modern technology, world waste material, collected and perhaps burnt in volcanic areas or buried so deep in the earth, in the wilderness desert areas of the mid-Sahara where nobody goes, or in the empty quarter in Arabia or the Gobi Desert. But all these ideas and visions, some far-fetched, and above all, the continuation of this Congress needs money.
I will play the full speech after this video, and you will hear him say that the world order has these problems. It's indigenous people and it's wildlife. People and wild animals are problems? What kind of madness are these world order Caesars afflicted with? I hope I have given you enough information to expose the designs of the world order crowd. They hope to run the lives of people for generations to come. They are the same crowd who created a Hitler, arranged the assassination of Lincoln and Kennedy, and have indicated elsewhere that they want to drastically reduce the population of the world to make environment and development more sustainable. Please quickly carry the truth to others. This video has photocopy exhibits accompanying it too, and you can make unaltered copies of this videotape as much as you please. Large quantities can be ordered at $8 a piece, including photocopied materials, plus postage, until July 4th, 1992. Send your orders and checks to this address. If you want to talk, I will call you collect. So send me your phone number. The light of freedom is going out throughout the world. You know who the culprits are now. It may not be too late to educate key people who can stop them. And you, watching this videotape, are one of the sparks that may ignite the countryside into flames of indignation against these people. Perhaps society still has some leaders that won't let us down. Goodbye and God bless you.
So let's get the proceedings running now, and we will see how we go. Thank you. Mr. Maurice Strong, who most of you already know.
Thank you very much, and you've already heard perhaps too much from me, so I think we're reaching the point at which we want to involve you, all of you, in the next step of this conference, which is really to come to grips with some of the principal action-oriented issues. And one of the most important initiatives that is open here for your consideration is that of the Conservation Banking Program. As we mentioned this morning, we have as our chairman, fortunately, the person who really is the source of this very significant concept. He is one of the trustees of the International Wilderness Foundation, which sponsored this meeting. He was at the first of these congresses. So his conversion to the relationship between conservation and economic development has been a pioneering one. His work on many dams. I used to be in the hydroelectric power part of the energy business myself. Many of the energy developments that we've seen have come from his early anticipation of our energy needs and his early work in supporting pioneering initiatives to deal with these needs. So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand, and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rocha.
Morris, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said. And I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me. And I want to start there a little bit of my talk to you on a somewhat different vein. You see, in order to further the ideals of the world wilderness concept and to prevent the concept and this concept just to remain an ideal, it is of paramount importance to find ways and means of finding and promoting its rationale. There are these ways and means of putting this concept into effect and overcoming or minimizing some of the problems set out by the speakers in this Congress, such as pollution, prevention of acid rain, waste disposal. There are alternative methods and harmless alternative methods for energy, and they're available. Alternative uses of water resources not involving vast inundations of land or displacing humans and its indigent wildlife, harnessing wave energy, solar energy, wind power, just to mention a few. To overcome the chilling, doom-laden prognostications of Dr. Irving Mintzer's greenhouse effect, perhaps it could be possible to utilize CO2, carbon dioxide, one of its main causes, to manufacture dry ice, to maintain the polar caps and the actual temperature of the ice there, and maintain their present temperature. Innovative and modern technology, world waste material, collected and perhaps burnt in volcanic areas or buried so deep in the earth, in the wilderness desert areas of the mid-Sahara where nobody goes, or in the empty quarter in Arabia or the Gobi Desert. But all these ideas and visions, some far-fetched, and above all, the continuation of this Congress needs money. A start has been made by the thoughts and care of one man. Michael Sweetman. His ideas have had lip service paid to them by some of our speakers here during the Denver conference. The meetings now of the new concept of an international conservation banking program involves all sectors of the human community. Governmental and intergovernmental agencies, the public and private agencies, large charitable foundations, as well as ordinary individuals worldwide. Michael Sweetman has written the foreword to this concept. Its final form will no doubt be altered, watered down, or widened. But this convention must put forward this charter. And with the collective wisdom available here today, the charter can be enhanced, embracing those who have given their thoughts in the Denver Public Forum. by thinking forward as to how to reach out to the public at large, to every corporate entity throughout the world, to put aside, hopefully tax-free, a part of their profits to fund our ecological and environmental protection. Ladies and gentlemen, every country has its own problems, its indigenous peoples and its wildlife. This International Conservation Bank must know no frontiers, no boundaries. Its funds must be used constructively and not to be challenged into greedy hands or weapons of destruction. I hesitate to link this bank with world wilderness, but I would like to link it with our survival as a human race. This, our generation, must not be cursed by our descendants, if we have any, as to the greatest destructors and squanderers of the world's resources. That great philosopher and cleric, Teilhard de Chardin, wrote, and I quote, "Man can harness the winds, the waves, and the tides. But when he can harness the energy of love, then for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire." Michael Sweetman. Michael Sweetman, your love for the world wilderness concept has given you the necessary fire in your belly to produce the germ of the future needs of this concept. And I have great pleasure in asking you to put it forward.
Great. Okay. That was quite fascinating in the respect that about 15 people actually turned off during that video. And it's one of the most important videos that they could ever possibly see. So we know that there are people out there who do understand this. And as George Hunt said in the video, you now understand this. You can pass this on to other people. You understand the history of it. And you can be one of those who may be out there to ignite the fire, ignite the spark, which will bring the fire of indignation. I'll give you the correct quote. It said, "You are one of the sparks to ignite the countryside into flames of indignation." That was 1987. So most of the comments in here are great. And thanks for joining me. And this video I've been meaning to actually put out for quite a long time, but it was already online. Problem is, hardly anyone's watched it. Yet hundreds of thousands of idiots will watch stuff that has no information in whatsoever. That's the wilderness of the mind. And thanks out there for all the people who are not in the wilderness of the mind project, the fourth world. I'm going to draw this to a close now, but I'm going to be doing more of these over the next few weeks. And do use that video and the quotes in that video. You can find it easily online. You can actually find it on Odyssey. You can find it on Odyssey and you can download it from there. So if you can't download it on YouTube, you can download it on Odyssey. But that was one of the most important videos ever for those who understand what is going on and those who want some background information as to how it all happened. So you can use the quotes in there, the preface to that video with all the information. I gave you the quotes too. So that's great. So it will be passed. Good. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody out there. And yes, I'll be back soon. I'm not going to waffle. I hope that was useful. I know it was useful. And I hope you're going to be the people who set the spark and set alight a fire of indignation. Thanks a lot. Good night.